Hello and welcome to everyone listening to the Written Melanin Podcast, the place where you come to get your weekly dose of melanated creativity. I'm your host, C.M. Lockhart, an author of fantasy books featuring Black girls who aren't all that nice, and the owner of the Melanin Library, an online database of books written by Black authors. And in this space, I invite you to listen to the journeys of Black authors with the hope that you'll gain something from it. I am glad that you're here. And today, you guys, I am here with Tati Richardson, and I'm so excited. She is the author of The Build Up, named one of Amazon's best books of 2023 and a Booklist top romances of 2023. Co-founder of the Romance in Color podcast and an Apple Books writer to watch. Under the name T.M. Richardson, she writes steamy indie published works such as the USA Today bestseller The Oath. A native of Atlanta, Tati lives in the suburbs with her husband and daughter. She collects red lipstick, Wonder Woman memorabilia, and unique eyewear, and she's an amazing author, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. We've been mutuals for so long. Welcome to the podcast, Tati.
Thank you. And of all the days I don't have on red lipstick, right? So
Right, all the days.
of all the days.
I've heard you have quite the collection. Like, I saw that on your bio.
I do.
How many do you have?
I do. I probably have about 60 red lipsticks. Seriously.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's crazy. My husband's sick of me.
Do you have a...
Yeah, I do. I think my favorites are, of course, classic Ruby Woo by MAC. And then my other second one is probably Cherry Blossom by the Colored Rain. So those are my two favorite, top two favorite red lipsticks.
I'm here for it. So before we even get into the authory creative things, if you're looking for a good red lipstick, she gave you recommendations. So you have no reason to go outside the house looking crazy now.
Right.
But that being said, for anyone who is listening to this is their first time interacting with you, please let them know who you are in your own words.
I am Tati Richardson. I write what I call a sexy romance for Black Zennials, meaning that, pocket of us between the ages of like 50 to maybe 45, 40. And I write romance that's nostalgic, gives you like all those 90s romance feels on the contemporary side. On the indie side, which is T.M. Richardson, I give you very erotic, high heat pairings. I wouldn't say it's erotica. Like I was telling somebody else, it's probably erotic romance because there still is a romantic thread and element going on in the stories. But yeah, I absolutely love writing romance that centers Black folks and that centers particularly Black people who are over the age of 40, who are older, middle age, have lived some life, have some wisdom. I hope. Not saying they're not going to make mistakes, but they have some wisdom and have some, life experiences that I think a lot of people can relate to. I think younger people can too, but definitely people of my age are like, yeah, I've been through that. I know what that feels like.
And that's kind of what intrigued me, right? Because I'm not there yet, right? Life-wise. However, something that I do pay attention to is kind of like this gap in demographic almost with a lot of books where it's just like either you are like a youngin', like you are straight out of high school in that
Right.
17, 18, 19, they're starting to push it to like 20
new adult
type age, new adult era.
Yeah.
Or you don't exist. So
don't exist
at all. And so I know that there used to be like just genuinely adult romance, like growing up, like you said, in the early 90s, in the 90s and such. But I feel like in 2024 that it has taken like a sharp decline. I kind of wanted to know, like, I don't want to say what led you to writing like older protagonists, but like what's your journey been like in writing them, trying to like market your books and get them out there, knowing that, like you said, that demographic doesn't really exist in publishing at this point?
I think it's tough, but I think I have a unique perspective, and I think audiences in general, and I'm going to speak as a Black woman because that is my lived experience. There are hardly any stories about us in our 40s reaching certain journeys and things like that. And I think for me, marketing to that demographic directly has been the most helpful thing. And my journey to writing that type of romance was pretty simple. I started out trying to write romance that was just generally people in their 20s, 30s and stuff. And I was like, I don't know what the heck 20, 30-year-olds are going through right now. Like I can't relate. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just get rid of that. Like, I need to write a story that I can put my all into, and what I can put my all into is writing a story about people my age, in their 40s, even their early 50s, even, because I'm getting close to the 50 girl, but I'm in the middle of the road. But I,
Hey, well, they not forever, okay?
my mother-in-law says we're 21 forever. So, it was easier for me to just craft those stories because I'm living it now. I'm living it now. My girlfriends are living it now. They're coming to me with stories about trying to find love in their 40s, early 50s, and stuff like that. Still wanting love, still desiring partnership. And I say, you know what? These are the stories I want to tell, not the stories of the hot, tight 20-year-old whose body is still looking great. You know what I'm saying? I want to talk about the person who has, some little cellulite or C-section scar, some gray hair, stuff like that, who have lived through some things. Um,
But I think that's so important because the
mm-hmm,
thing is that I feel like in so many aspects, not just like I live in fantasy, right? That's my
of
comfort
course, yeah.
realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also really love a good romance, and I feel like there's always this conversation of like how people are portrayed in romance, right?
Yeah.
And it's always like you said, one very specific. Like the man is always like young, he's always athletic no matter what he does. He could be
No matter
like
what
a
he does.
professional knitter, but he's got six-pack washboard abs, okay? And he's
Yes.
gotta be over 6 foot, and he's just fine for no reason, just walking around, just
Yes.
single and non-toxic and just fine. And I'm just kinda like, where do these people exist? Where do y'all live? I would like to know. But it's also one of those things where it's just like, I feel like there are so many things just in fiction in general where
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, I feel like as a culture, as a society, we would be better served leaning towards more realistic portrayals in some things.
I
Like
agree.
there's everybody doesn't look like the perfect model, right? Everybody
Mm-hmm.
doesn't live a perfect life. And, even when it comes to like fantasy and things, it's like it's okay to have a healthy relationship between 2 characters. Everything doesn't have to be toxic. "Oh my god,
Yeah.
why are you like this?" type relationships, and that's also why when I saw your book, Losing Sight,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, "Oh, her eyesight's going." I was like, "You know what? As someone who wears glasses, I don't know how I feel about this." I feel a little theme flirting now.
No pun intended.
So with all that being said, wanting to write older protagonists, real people, right, on
Mm-hmm.
the page and,
Mm-hmm.
losing sight. I'm gonna let you tell the people what it's about, but I saw it and I was just like, you know what? I'm not the target demographic, but I'm probably still gonna go pick this one up.
I think the target demographic, even if you aren't in your 40s, is still sisters who with bad eyesight. I guess they got
Literally,
bad
y'all are
eyesight.
watching the video. I got in
Yeah.
contacts. I can't see for squat, y'all. Like,
Yeah, I have my glasses. So, yeah, I'm always going to wear my glasses. I used to be a contact girly, but then I was like, I got tired of touching my eyes. So then I was like, you know what? And always getting something in my eye when I was doing it. So I was like, nah, let me just switch back to glasses. But yeah, Losing Sight is my next traditionally published novel. It comes out February 11th on Generous Press, which is a inclusive imprint that is pushing the boundaries forward with diverse and inclusive romance stories.
oh, love that.
So shout out to Elena and Amber, our publishers. But it is a story about Tanika, who is a sports reporter, great at her job. Think Pam Oliver, you know what I mean? Top of her game. And she gets pushed out of her job for someone younger and more appealing to certain demographics. And she thinks it's because she's young and hot and all that stuff, which is part of the reason. But part of the other reason is Tanika's in denial that she's messing up her lines and her eyesight is failing her. And so she finally gets pushed to the brink. Something happens. She gets pushed to the brink where she needs to go and get her eyesight checked and enters Gideon, which is her best friend's cousin, who's an optometrist, who's kind of had a thing for Tanika for a minute, but has refused to act on it because he's a widower and he's kind of going through his own grief process. And so they meet, and sort of these things, weird magical type elements, start pushing them together. And it's pretty much about their love story and their journey to a happily ever after. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the gist of the book, I think, without giving too much away.
I mean, I'm excited about it. I mean, not gonna
Yeah.
lie, I was on Twitter yesterday and I
Uh-huh.
saw what you posted, that artwork, and I was like,
Yeah.
Okay." But you
That's
know
a
what?
that's a scene from in the book. Yeah. Glasses are
Okay,
getting foggy.
a little steamy, can't
Little
see through it,
steamy,
right?
yes.
But one of the things that I noticed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but did
Sure.
I imagine the A&T logo on his shirt?
Uh-huh. It's on
Is he an
there.
Aggie?
He is an Aggie, Aggie pride.
Hey, Aggie pride. I am a proud alumni of North Carolina
Okay,
Agricultural Technical State
okay. I
University.
lived in Greensboro many, many years. And so that's why, a little fun fact about me, every book that I put out has a little HBCU teaser in it.
Eh,
And so in this book,
Educate the culture.
Educate the Culture, yes, that's right, historically black colleges and universities. And I'm an alum of Clark Atlanta University. So the girls in this book, in this friend group, are all alums of CAU. And Gideon, the character in this book, went to A&T. He's an optometrist, went to A&T, and he also lived in Goldsboro. He's from Goldsboro, North Carolina. So he's a North Carolina boy through and through. So I mean, I lived in North Carolina for 2 years. I lived in Greensboro. So Aggies are everywhere.
Everywhere.
And plus, lots of friends went to
Everywhere.
A. Yeah, so it is what it is. Little love to A&T.
Well, I appreciate it personally because
You're welcome.
one of the things that I love seeing is, like, I love seeing HBCU culture in
Hmm.
fiction of any kind, because
Hmm.
it's one of those things where it's like you always see, like, people making up fictional colleges and things like that, but it's
Yeah,
also like,
yeah.
HBCUs exist, you guys.
Hmm.
Like, that's
Yes,
totally fine. And I'm always a proponent of, like, introducing it to people who may not have known about it, because my experience talking to people are like, I didn't even know about an HBCU
right,
until after my college experience, so
right, right.
love the subliminal messaging in there.
Yes, interesting. Yes.
But you mentioned supernatural occurrences, and I'm just kinda
Yes.
like, are you dabbling into the fantasy realm? Are you coming over to the dark side?
I ain't gonna get as dark as you. I'm not gonna get as dark as you, but I like a little, cozy paranormal type stuff. One of my good friends is Celestine Martin, and she writes
Oh,
the,
yeah.
wishful thinking series,
Mhm.
and I was sort of similarly inspired by her to do this. But when I told her the premise of the book, she's like, "Oh my God, just go for it!" You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna go deep dark, but I do have a few little, cozier paranormal type things that I want to work on. But I don't see myself getting deep fantasy. Nah, girl. I'm gonna let y'all have it. But a little magical realism, a little, speculative type things. I love to incorporate it in romance, so that's cool. But I'm not gonna go too deep on the fantasy side. No, I'm gonna let y'all have.
That's fair.
That's too much world building for me.
See, that's crazy because I love the world building. I love being like, "How far can we push this? What about the world would I change right now? We're just gonna run with that. We're just gonna
Yeah,
run with."
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I'd be
I'm
too
always here
tired.
for it.
I'd be too tired. Like, okay, and you gotta get magic systems, girl. No, no.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. Everybody has their lane, and honestly, I think you have found yours because
I
you
hope
have
so.
won multiple awards with your romance novels. And the first one that I saw from you was, I believe it was The Oath with the three friends.
Yes.
After, yeah, I haven't read it yet, but it is
Okay.
on my TBR. Only
Okay.
because I've been deep in my fantasy pocket for, like, the last couple of years trying to be like, "Okay, I'm looking for that great fantasy story that's just gonna move my spirit." Still on the search for it. But I've been dibbling and dabbling in romance every
Hmm.
now and again because that's what brings me joy. I like
Of
seeing
course.
people fall in love, right?
Yes.
So, I know that was your first, like, big novel, right? Or am I making that up?
Well, my debut was the build up, but this is my first. I would say for it to hit the USA Today bestseller list as an indie, that was a big deal. Um, I shocked and amazed that happened. I was like, because it was an experiment. I just thought, I've told this story so much, when people are like, yeah, really? I'm like, yeah, really. It was an experiment. It was a project between projects just to see if I could do something different. and then talking to my writing group and my writing friends. And I was like, I have this idea. What do you guys think? And they're like, do it, you try it, do it. And a lot of the people in my writing group do write poly romance, Kat Jackson and A.H. Cunningham. I've interviewed and talked to Rilsey Adams, and these are people who have written, successful poly romances. And I was like, I want to try it just to see if I could do it. I didn't think I, I'm just like, I don't know, see, I put it out myself. If it does well, it does well. If it don't, it don't. No harm, no foul. You know what I mean? So imagine my surprise when I publish it. Then I wake up 24 hours to everybody on Book Talk, Black Book Talk, even, just Book Talk in general talking about it. And I was like, what is happening here? What is happening? This little book, like what is going on? And then months later, for it to hit the USA Today bestseller list, you know, total shock, total shock. But I'm very, very glad and very blessed and very thankful to Book Talk, particularly Black Book Talk, for pushing it to the forefront. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind talking about that experience, because I know for a
Hmm.
lot of indie authors, and I have a lot of listeners who are indie authors,
Yeah.
and when you hear USA best-selling author, right?
Hmm.
USA Today best-selling author, I
Hmm.
think a lot of the question that comes up is like, okay, so how do I as an indie author get into that conversation, get into that league? Like, how do you know you become that? You've hit that list when you don't have an agent or somebody who's like watching for you or telling you this information, you know?
I think when you start seeing a lot of word of mouth, when you start seeing a lot of people posting, reposting, talking about it, tagging you, that's when you realize, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. And for me, I think part of the reason also that the book hit that list was it got some mainstream exposure through Steamy LitCon, which is a huge romance conference. And we worked with Melissa, who is the founder of Steamy Lit in the Steamy Lit bookstore, to have a special edition of this book. And so when the special edition hit and then it went out to the main like market, like the wider market, that's when I was like, okay, I think people are really reading this book. Then imagine my surprise and shock when I get tagged one day and it's Allie Hazelwood telling everybody about reading this book. And I was like,
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
crazy.
I'm sorry, what? Like, the Allie Hazelwood is telling people to read this book. And shout out to Denise Williams, who's also a romance author, who was telling Allie about the book at Steamy LitCon. Was like, if you don't pick up any book here today, then you need to pick this book up. And
Oh,
Melissa was saying it was flying off the shelves, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, what's happening? So I think that's also part of the reason that it was successful. I think it's about positioning yourself with the right people who are going to uplift you and uplift your
mhm.
work, whether it be book talkers, book influencers, book indie bookstores, things like that. Because I really do feel like the old success rests on all of those platforms, the success of all of those platforms, because it has touched all of those folks in those various ways. So, I can't say it's just because I wrote this book. No, magical things need to align to make those type of things happen. Because trust me, I was not gunning for it or trying to be on anybody's list. It simply happened.
And I'm really grateful that you're sharing that because, like I said,
Hmm.
outside looking in, it's always like, "Oh, wow, this book is blowing up. Like, what did they do? What happened? What is going on behind the scenes?" And, you're not the first person to tell me that a lot of it is serendipity. You had the right group of
Yes,
people telling the right
yes.
other group of people at the right time, and
Hmm.
momentum took off. And it's just like things happen when they're supposed to happen. And, God has a plan for everybody. And
Exactly.
if you're not a religious girly, you can insert God with whatever you believe, but that's what I believe. Okay, Jesus. All right? But everything happens for a reason, everything aligns, and having that community, having a strong community around you every step of the way. Because as I'm listening, it's like, you had people around you who were
Hmm.
like, "Write the book," who
Hmm.
encouraged you, who were like,
Hmm.
you had people to tap to be like, "Hey, you've done this before. Can you
Yeah,
can you help me?" But then
yeah.
also when it came out, it's just also people that you may or may not have ever had conversations with
Hmm.
telling other people about it. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things where it's just like, as an indie author, I can never stress enough the importance of having and building and maintaining a community of people, especially as a
Absolutely.
Black indie author, because those are
Mhm.
the people who are going to go hard for you. Because you mentioned it, book talk and Black book talk are not the same thing. They
No,
are
ma'am.
not the same thing.
No, ma'am.
So it's also one of those things where it's just like, I know that a lot of people are introverts. I'm an introvert. I know I don't seem
Mhm.
like it, but I really don't like talking to people. I do this because for reasons, personal reasons. Okay. But
Same.
I'm an introvert with extrovert tendencies. Okay.
Mhm.
But it's like being on TikTok and being around people who love writing and reading and being in community as much as you do is so important. And it's just like, it
Mhm.
reminds you that even in this isolated industry where you're sitting at a keyboard talking to your imaginary friends by yourself, trying to convince yourself that you're not crazy, there are
Right.
other people doing the exact same thing and there are people who want you to continue doing that,
Ye
and it's
Yes.
really uplifting in unexpected ways.
Yes, absolutely. And you are right. It's about positioning yourself in these spaces where people are going to uplift and encourage you. Like, I think I started out initially on Twitter and finding communities via Twitter, and
Mhm.
then kind of shifting over when my podcast partner convinced me to. She's like, "You have to get on TikTok. You have to get on TikTok." I was like, "Girl, I guess." So shifting over to TikTok, and I'm thinking again because of my age, like, what do I have to what do I have to offer a group of people who are like in their 20s, 30s? I don't think they're gonna resonate with the things that I have to offer. But lo and behold, there's also a pocket of folks who really were interested in my work across all ages, and I was just so shocked and amazed. But again, positioning yourself in the community and being willing to be open and make those connections is really, really important. I mean, being on Twitter was how I found my core writing group, how I found my core writing friends, the people that I, you know, vent to in the group chat, because you need a group chat.
Hey,
Don't put that stuff
get the group
online.
chat.
Keep it here, exactly. Keep it in the group chat. It's how I found my writing communities of word makers and inclusive romance project. These are the people that I say laid the foundation for me and are still supporting me and uplifting me. So I know how it is to be introverted too, because you know while I, like you say, I'm here talking to you and stuff like that, and I do my Twitter, I do my Instagram, I do my podcast. On the real, when I get in social situations, I'm like, oh my god, what do I do? I mean, I got a conference to go to this weekend, and I'm sitting there going stressing about it, like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be in the same room as Beverly Jenkins. What the heck? I don't know what to do.
You better talk to her. You
I
gotta
know,
talk
girl.
to her.
I'm going to. I'm going to build up the strength some kind of way.
Right. And
But if I don't talk to nobody, and Brenda Jackson gonna be there, so I got to talk to
look,
both. Whew. So
I love
anyway,
that for you.
I'm trying to center myself.
At
But
this, you're gonna
yeah,
crush it.
I know. But yeah, it's about putting yourself out there and trying to, make connections and make community. It's so so important. It's so so hard, and especially when you feel like you're too old to make friends. I think that's the other thing. When you get to a certain age, when you get to your late 30s, 40s and stuff, you're like, man, I'm too old to make friends. But I don't think you're ever too old to make friends, genuine friendships. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I actually branched out and reached out and to people and could make these connections and made genuine friendships.
I'm glad that you did too. And I will say that it's not just an older adult thing. Like I just hit 30 like 2 weeks ago.
Mm,
And it's just kind of like, I still feel like, I don't know, how do you make friends as an adult, right?
yeah,
Especially if
yeah.
you are introverted and especially if you are, like me, like I work from home,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of like, I'm not going out and talking to people just random. Like y'all just do,
Yeah,
y'all just go and talk to strangers. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So I think at any stage it can be kind of overwhelming, but you touched on something that I don't want people to like gloss over as they're listening to this. And it's the fact that, even feeling like like, what am I going to say? Is there an
Mm-hmm.
audience of people who want to hear and see
Mm-hmm.
what I have and what I'm offering? And it's just like, yes, there is. And I think we've all heard the phrase, there's an audience for every book, right? You just have to
Yes.
find them. The
Yes.
same is true of like you yourself, your marketing, how you choose to show up online, right?
Absolutely.
You're not as alone as you feel. Like, sure, the algorithm, I am the algorithm is going to push to you the young people who are young and pretty and single and doing all the crazy dances and the trends, because that's how society works. Young people set
Hmm.
trends, and older generations tend to follow until they are the old people. Okay, this is how it works.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that the other communities and groups don't exist. Just like how Book Talk and Black Book Talk coexist on the same platform, they're not
Hmm.
necessarily mutually exclusive, but
Right.
they are a different demographic of people. And it's just like, you got to find your people. And it's okay if
Hmm.
it's not the very first day you're walking in and be like, hey, I'm here. It's okay to test it out.
Yes, absolutely. And you find what fits. You find what works for you. You find the people in the audience that works for you. Because I know my books aren't for everybody. I've been
I think
I I know you probably experience this too, where people have tagged you and stuff, and you're like, why are you tagging me in this? And you giving me a negative review, like, why are you doing this? If you didn't
like,
like
this is
it, girl,
weird.
you didn't
The
like it.
choice.
What are you doing? You didn't have to tag me about it, but
You don't have to tell me
you
to my face. That's
and you
fine,
have to tell
but,
it to my
like,
face, whatever. But it's you're gonna find your people. You're gonna find your people. You're gonna find your home for your work. You're gonna find your home for your voice. I feel that way not only about the audience that you reach, but also where you publish your work. So as a person who is hybrid, a person who is also indie and traditionally published, it's important for me to also find a place, particularly on the traditional side, where it's going to be a home and a voice for my work. So, you just got to find where you get in, where you fit in, basically.
and I would also add to that, like, it's okay to create your own spaces too. I know for me,
Absolutely.
a lot of my community, I had to be like, "Okay, I wanna talk to other Black people who write Black stories, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of this." A lot of
Right,
groups are
right.
very inclusive, and I'm not saying inclusive is a bad thing, so I wanna,
Hmm.
like, preface it by that with that, right? But me personally, I knew that the type of stories that I'm a Black woman, I'm writing stories that feature and center Black women and people.
Hmm.
Right? And I'm like, I wanna be around other people who do that, right? Because
Exactly.
experience as a Black author is different from those of other people of color and other non-people of color, right? Not
Hmm.
invalidating them, it's just different.
It's
So,
different.
it's just kind of like I wanted to be a part of groups that include that where I wasn't the minority, where I wasn't the one token person there, and I had other people
Exactly.
who understood when I'm bouncing around marketing ideas, why some suggestions don't work the same for what I'm writing as for other stories, right? So,
Exactly.
that's part of the reason why I started Written in Melanin, why I started the podcast, why I started doing all the things that I did, because even as an introvert, I was like, I know that if I feel this way, there are definitely other people out there somewhere who feel this
Hmm.
way, and if I
Hmm.
can't find the space that I'm looking for, then I'll be the space, right? Kinda like that
Exactly.
age-old advice of, like, be the kind of friend that you want in your life, and then you'll
Hmm.
attract those kind of people, Kinda the same
Hmm.
energy. But
Exactly.
I'll just say that it's okay. It's okay, you guys.
It's okay. It's okay. You will find your lane.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I feel like we deviated so far from all these questions that I wanted to ask you.
That's okay. It's
But
okay.
one of the things that I really did want to ask that I liked personally just for myself knowing is just like, what started you on this journey? Because you mentioned that, it was the oath was an experiment, but the buildup was your first book. So like what
Mhm.
got you from, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm really gonna do this to where you're at now, getting ready to publish your fourth book? Like what was that journey like for you?
It's wild when you say it out loud like that, like fourth book.
That's
So I know. So before I became like before I committed myself to writing romance as a career, I was a PhD student in literature, right? I was a PhD student. Actually, I wrote, you talk about fantasy and stuff. I wrote, my PhD was focused on speculative fiction and the works of Octavia Butler, right?
Ooh,
Because I'm a
love her.
huge Octavia Butler fan. So I was going through a lot of things emotionally at the time. I had lost my mother. I found out I was pregnant. I was going through some craziness on my job. All these things. So all these things were like snowballing, right? And so at the time, I was supposed to be writing my dissertation, and every time I tried, I couldn't do it. I was just like, I can't do it. I can't sit here and write this. I had all the work, I had all the material, I had all the research that I couldn't do it. So instead of me writing my dissertation, I would like be picking up a romance novel, reading it, or sketching out like plots in my head, like, oh, this would be a cool idea for a book, da, da, da. Instead of thinking about romance, right? Until
Mhm.
finally I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can get my hand at writing a romance. I wrote a manuscript. It was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't know what I was doing. I wrote this thing and sent it off. Like I thought that's what you do. You write it, and you send it off, and see what people say. Right? All these rejections, all this stuff. I was like, okay, Tatiana, you are a student first and foremost. If you want to be good at any craft, you need to be a student of the craft. So I took a step back, and I was like, you know what? Let me again find community, get in community, make connections, find resources to try and figure out about what it is about romance that's appealing to me. I told my husband, I said, look, I'm gonna take a step back from this PhD program because I want to focus on writing romance. He said, if it's gonna make you happy, honey, do it. I said, okay.
Yes.
So I know, good dude. I first found Inclusive Romance Project. I started writing kind of bits and pieces of the build up. I finished it, you know, was like, okay, what do I do with this now? Got into a mentorship program, started learning the craft, started like reading every craft book I could think of. I'm looking at them over there, a craft book I could think of about romance and everything like that, resources and looking at, not really classes, but like just seminars and stuff like that. So really, I really did become a student of the craft because as with any genre with romance, there are mechanics. There are certain things that have to happen in order to make it a romance. Things that you have to do, what we call the beats. You have to hit certain beats in the romance, all this stuff. And at first I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, I'm just writing, writing, thinking it's a romance. Also, was writing and not really truly writing in my voice. So I'm writing
Mhm.
thinking this is what people want to read instead of writing what it was that was really me. It was really what I want to put across as a brand, as a voice, as a writer.
Mhm.
Excuse me. And so, long story short, I did all this, did this mentorship program, decided to participate in DV Pit. I don't know if they still do that anymore, but it's Diverse Voices Pitch, where you pitch your idea online. At the time, it was on Twitter. It was 180 characters back then, where you pitch your idea to publishers and stuff. They like it, they contact you, blah blah blah, and ask for the manuscript and stuff. I got a few fillers out, but a lot of rejections. And then one of them was two publishing houses. One of them was Harlequin saying they were interested, but they needed more from me. They wanted me to revise it, wanted me to resubmit it. And so I took my mentorship time to revise and resubmit that manuscript. And shout out to my mentor, Kilby Blades, who's also a romance author. And we went through so many drafts of it, so many drafts of it. And then finally I sent it off. Didn't hear back. I was like, oh, I guess they ain't like it. Was about to like pull it. And then my friends were like, no, 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 just wait and see. And so like a month after my birthday at the time, that's when I heard from them. They're like, oh, we want to publish it. And I was like, oh, okay. So here we go. Here's the ride. Let's go. So that was about 20 into 20, no, 2022. And they're like, so I'm thinking, oh, when is this coming out? It's 2023. I'm like, wait, a year? I got like a year to wrap this up. And so it was a lot of hard work, a lot of learning curves to kind of get over in that whole process of learning about the whole business of romance, the business of marketing, the business of things like that. So a lot of the marketing I do now, I learned from that first book. A lot of the things I do, in order to get the word across about my books, I learned from publishing the build up. So it was a huge learning curve, a huge learning process, and I'm really thankful for it.
I am so glad that you shared that because honestly, every time I interact with authors, right, and I get to hear about their journeys, I'm always like, okay, how do we get here? And I love whenever someone mentions that they had to study the craft. And
Yes.
one thing that I am always, always, always going to say, and this may ruffle some feathers. If it ruffles your feathers, sit with that. Just dissect that with yourself. Right.
Hmm.
But it's the fact that the first thing that you ever write probably, generally speaking, should not be the first thing that you ever publish because there's
Exactly.
so many things to learn. There's so many things to learn about the craft. There's so many things to learn about how to be an author in this industry and how it works and the ins and the outs and the
Mhm.
ups and the downs and what really makes a good story. And it's just like, yes, there may be a lot of natural talent there. A lot of natural talent. Let's be real here. A lot of us get into writing stories because the first thing that we ever write is not the first story that ever came to our heads, right? We've been
Exactly.
doing this for a long time, right?
Mhm.
So I understand that. But as you said, you have to be a student of the craft. And when you start talking
Mhm.
about wanting a career in this, when you start talking about wanting to be a professional, it's like there's more to it than just being able to write a good and compelling story. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, this was a journey because also when you're on the
Yes.
outside looking in, you see people pop up and you're just like, oh, it seems so easy for them. And it's just like, nah, this was a
Mhm.
journey. Like, this was
Yeah.
a journey.
Yeah,
And
somebody hits the bestseller list and you're like, "Oh, wow, they're an overnight success, baby." That overnight took 5, 10, 15 years,
right?
to get there. So,
It's not just, "Oh, I sat down and write a book, and the next day I was on a bestseller list." And the thing is,
exactly.
it does happen that way for some people, right? But also pay attention to where those people are at and whether they actually have a career or they had a moment. And one thing that I try to tell
Mhm.
people all the time is that you want to prepare yourself to have a career, not just a singular viral moment. Where it's just like,
Yes.
okay, everybody cares for that one book. But the hardest thing about being an author, and I feel like really shows whether or not you're going, I don't say be around, but like it's harsh reality whether you're going to be around or not,
Mhm.
is that first book people will love. The question is, can you sell that second book? Specifically, that second book, if you're fantasy, that second series, the book that has
Yes.
nothing to do with that first one. Are the people who loved you in the beginning still going to love you when you're doing other things? Because that's how you get your Beverly Jenkins. That's how you get your Brenda Jackson.
Mhm.
That's how you get your
Mhm.
people who have been here and are staples. Like, you didn't read just one book and be like, "Oh, well, I like that book." You're like, "No, I like
Right.
this author." Right?
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. You want sustainability. You want to have a pack. 'Cause if it's just a hobby for you, you can just write, you know, a blog or not talking about because I had a blog, but you can just write about in a casual way. You don't have to think about publishing and the whole business of publishing if you just want to do it as a hobby. If you want to do it as a career, you have to think about all the things that could go with any career that you're thinking about positioning and marketing. And we talk so much about marketing, but it's so important. And like you said, sometimes lightning strikes and you're just in the right place at the right time, but sometimes it's about where you are when things are happening, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Sometimes sometimes things just work out, and I'm gonna leave
Yeah.
that there because I feel like I could get down a very slippery rabbit hole with that train of thought.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes.
not gonna dismiss anybody's success, but I will say that sometimes right place, right time, that's just what
Yes.
happens. But that being what it is, Tati, like for you specifically in your
Hmm.
work and all the
Hmm.
things that you've learned on your journey, and like I said, coming up on your fourth book, and you've crossed that hurdle. You've written books where it's just like, hey, this book has nothing to do with the previous one, and y'all are still here,
Yeah.
so I guess y'all like
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah, I guess y'all like me. Yeah.
What lasting effect would you choose to have your work leave on people?
It's so funny. I asked that question on my podcast too. I feel like tables being turned. I want people to, when they pick up a book and they say this is a Tati Richardson book or a T.M. Richardson book, no matter the genre or subgenre of romance, put it that way, I still want you to be able to see yourself. I want you to be able to be like, oh, I can relate to this. Yeah, yeah, situations are fantastical. Yeah, okay, yeah, the lady got 3 boyfriends. All right, but 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 do you see yourself in Tatum? Do you see yourself in Tanika? Do you see yourself in Ari? Do you see yourself in Elisa? Do you see yourself in these FMCs that I've crafted and created Do you feel seen as a Black person? Do you get the nuances of what I'm saying? The cultural references? Do you feel like this is a Black romance book? That's what I want my lasting effect to be. This is a Black romance book. She put her own unique stamp on romance, and she put her own unique stamp on Black romance. And I see myself when I read her books.
I love it. I love it so much. I'm always going to be a stand for seeing yourself in a book,
Yeah.
especially as a Black woman, but as a Black person or anybody who's having to navigate the world and they are not, the social majority, I'll say. Because
Mm-hmm.
global majority is
Mm-hmm.
different from social majority, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm always going to
Yeah.
stand 10 toes down on that. So I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That being said, we've given a lot of advice,
Yes.
and I'm going to point out that if you've listened this far into the video, the podcast, wherever you're watching this, getting this information at, right? One of the biggest pieces of advice that I don't want y'all to gloss over is to be a student of the craft. Like, I'm probably gonna
Yes.
title this whole episode a student of the craft, because that's what you need to be. That's what you need to be. But aside from that,
Mm-hmm.
what writing advice would you give to any new authors starting out on their writing journey?
Writing advice. Don't try to copy anybody else's style. Number one. Try to develop your own voice. Number two. And number three, you don't have to write every day. The words will get written when they get written. As a person with a very, very busy schedule, I used to beat myself up like, oh my God, I'm not writing 30 minutes a day. Oh my God, I'm not writing, 1,500 words a day, 2,000 words a day, whatever. The words are going to get written when they get written. You know, a book is written a word at a time. So don't beat yourself up if you can't write every day. Don't beat yourself up if you can't sit at your computer and write for hours on end, because everybody doesn't have that luxury. So that's pretty much my advice I would give to writers coming up. Don't copy anybody. Find your voice, and you don't have to write every day. It'll get written. It'll get written.
I second that 100,000%. I've said it before, I will say it again, but seriously, y'all don't have to write every day. I know there
Mm-mm.
has been a very popular piece of advice that says that you need to write every day to take it seriously, but, also, we're full people living full lives,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't always happen, and there's a certain level of privilege that has to exist in order for you to carve out hours every day at the same time to write.
Absolutely.
And it's okay
Absolutely.
if that's not your reality. Just be kind to yourself, give grace to yourself, but then also hold yourself accountable and be like, if I can't write every day, how often can I write? And then
Exactly.
just go with that. And it's fine if that changes too, because life be life. And okay, we in 2024. We all
Ooh,
lived through
girl.
2020. Life be life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Lord. Yes,
So
Lord.
all that all that being said, honestly, Tati, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Please let
Thank you for
people know
having
where they
me.
find you. Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. Well, you can find me on all social media accounts. That is Threads, IG, TikTok. Where else am I on? Twitter/X. Pretty much everywhere under the same handle because I'm too lazy to create multiple handles. It is at Richard Writes On. It's a play on Richard Wright. Richard Writes, WRITESON. Richard Writes On. Everywhere on social media. My website is TatianaRichardson.com. I probably should have changed it to Tati Richardson, but it's neither here nor there. And I know we mentioned it, but I do have a podcast that comes out bi weekly, Romance in Color. That's color with a U. And we're pretty much on all, platforms wherever you get your podcast. But I'm pretty busy lady, but that's where you can find me on social media. And all my books are pretty much available on all platforms that you can buy books, with the exception of the Oath and the Offer ebooks are exclusively just on Amazon as they are part of Kindle Unlimited. So, yeah.
All right. And y'all know how this works. I will leave links to all of that either in the show notes or the description box on YouTube, wherever you are getting this at. But that being what it is, that is it for this episode of the Written in Melanin podcast, you guys. If you'd like to support this podcast, then please share it with someone you think may enjoy it. Join the Patreon at patreon.com/written in melanin. Grab a copy of my books from my website, cmlockhart.com, or donate to the podcast so that we can continue making content for you guys. There are links in the show notes /description box for everything. And thank you guys again so much for listening. Until next time, I hope all your books are full of melanin.